Your logo here? Nerd TV needs sponsors. Contact Bob at Cringely.com. This program is made possible by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Nerd TV. Program 8. Robert Cringely interviews Andy Grove's secret weapon, Avram Miller. October 14th, 2005. Hi, Avram. Welcome to Nerd TV.
Thank you.
This is great. Avram, I think you watched a few episodes now, or one or two, and so you know what this is about, and it's a little sort of free-form, unstructured, who the heck are you? And I want to thank you for wearing your hair today.
You're welcome. I'm happy to let my hair down.
Great. Now, Avram, how did you get in the high-tech business?
Oh, I got into high-tech business trying to study the brainwaves of Zen monks in 1965 or 66. Yeah, 65.
Oh, we all did that.
Yeah.
We were all studying those Zen monks.
Yeah.
No, where was this?
At Langley Porter at the UC Medical Center, and I began to do some work with a scientist named Joe Kamiya. Together we did the first alpha wave brain conditioning and biofeedback work, and we wired circuits by hand to do things. We started using the logic modules that were made by Digital Equipment Corporation at the time. That's what they used in their computers, but they started out just building flip-flops and AND gates and NOR gates and whatever. And eventually we bought a computer, and the computer was because someone else had been doing some research at Langley, in another institute, and we wanted to duplicate that research at Langley Porter. And we got a PDP-7. And I'll never forget that day because it came in. I had no idea what a computer was, not at all.
Yeah.
And the concept didn't mean anything to me. So they came in, and of course, a big piece of equipment in a rack. So the first thing I did is I opened the back of it, and I saw it had the same logic boards that I knew how to program.
Yeah.
Those logic boards I used to have a way of connecting them up with wires. And so I was amazed it was made out of the same thing. And I kept reading the manuals trying to figure out how it worked, and I was looking for the same kind of wiring system, which didn't exist, and came upon a discussion of software, which I didn't know existed. and it took me a while, a couple hours, and all of a sudden, the whole concept of the stored program came into my head. I couldn't believe it. It was like, it was love. And I stayed up the whole night learning how to program that computer. So that, I would say, is really the moment that I really got into high tech. And because from that time on, I had a pretty intimate relationship with computers. And of course, in those days, I could program them and change them. And, now I really can't.
So the day you saw your first computer was the day you became a computer programmer.
Yes, but I was, and I think to some extent this is kind of unusual. I was able to program computers, but I was also able to design the hardware of a computer, and in fact, even down to the transistor level, because in those days we actually could buy transistors.
Yeah.
And I knew how to make a flip-flop out of it, from a transistor, and so I had a pretty detailed understanding of what was going on, and so when I would write programs, I actually understood what the program was doing at the gate level. It was kind of strange. I don't think many people do that now.
Well, no. Were you writing in assembler or machine language? Or?
Well, we wrote an assembly language, but we debugged in machine language because it was faster to go in and change the switches than to go through the whole process that we would have to do. And the computer that we had when we first started it only had, the only program it had was read the switches and load them into the address that was specified in the switches. Yeah. And that was one thing I knew how to do, and the other thing I knew how to do is to start in one of those addresses. And so we had to put in the binary RIM, was called the RIM loader. I forget what this stood for. And then that RIM loader was smart enough to read a piece of a paper tape that was on the ASR 33, which was the terminal that had a paper tape reader. And that had an even bigger program in it. And that's how we would get in. Eventually, we had a tape system, which we actually created for ourselves. And so on the tape, we would have a
magnetic tape?
A magnetic tape.
Yeah.
We would have a image of the computer of the software we wanted to have in there. We eventually be able to get back to where we were if we turned the computer off.
So, and why Zen monks?
Well, that was because Joe Kamiya, who was still alive in the 70s, was interested in biofeedback and brainwaves. And he got this idea in his head that if you could teach people, well, first of all, he postulated that maybe the patterns of brainwaves would be different in a monk who was meditating or a person who was meditating. Mm-hmm. And they were. And then the next theory he had was if you could teach people to have that same state by giving them biofeedback, by giving feedback on their brainwaves, they would, because normally we don't know what's going on in their head. That if they got into that state, that is, they showed the same brainwave patterns, they would report the same experience. And that indeed was true. Mm-hmm. That's what we discovered through our experimentation. I didn't know anything about that. I was trying to figure out if I should play the piano for a living or become a Hasidic rabbi. When I realized I was running out of money, and I needed to get a job. And I had always some kind of feeling for electronics. And a friend of mine who was a doctor at that hospital doing research said, maybe this guy who's trying to do stuff, he's struggling with how to do it. Maybe you could help him. And that's how I met Joe and how I ended up there.
Now, didn't you do brainwave studies on astronauts as well?
Well, there was a not brainwave study. Well, they brought us in once because because some of the astronauts were reporting astral projection, the out of the body experiences, and so we were the astronauts with NOT, and we did a little consulting for NASA.
Your idea was to get the astronauts back in their bodies?
To keep them in their bodies.
Now, why is it that when we were watching Walter Cronkite in the space program in the 60s, we didn't know that those astronauts were getting out of their bodies?
Well, because, Walter kept it a secret. We were actually on the Walter Cronkite show.
You were?
Yeah. They came to our lab, and it was a really bad. It became a bad day for me because they kept spraying things on the equipment. I was so scared we could short everything out. I was running around trying to keep them from. Yeah, this was a long time ago. We're talking 40 years ago.
Yeah, those TV people are always spraying things.
Yeah, 40 years.
Well, you look good.
Thank you.
So, but at some point, so you went from piano player / potential Hasidic rabbi,
right,
to brainwave researcher,
right,
then computer programmer, brainwave researcher.
Well, so, yeah, right.
Yeah. And then what happened?
Well, I was actually what happened was Ronald Reagan, but I'll get back to it in a second. But I was doing a lot of work on the computer. I was doing I've been doing changes to the computer. I was known among some of the computer people, particularly Digital Equipment Corporation and some others. And what happened was that some of the money that we had gotten from grants had been frozen by then Governor Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. And even though these weren't actually, they were the administrator for the National Health Institute and for California, and so we had gotten these national grants, but the state had administrated. They froze our money. I got really upset. I didn't like Ronald Reagan. And at the same time, there was this Dutchman who had been in Boston for a long time and did some work at MIT, went back to Holland to create a new medical institute in Rotterdam, which was for cardiovascular medicine. It was called the Thorax Center, and it dealt with cardiovascular surgery, coronary care, and respiratory care. And he had a dream. His dream was to, and we're talking about now 1968, his dream was to use computer technology in, right from the ground floor up, and how to build this institute. And so they were allocated $50 million, they hadn't started anything, and he was looking for somebody to share his dream. And he was told about me by a number of people because, I was one of the few people that was really doing doing physiological signal processing.
Yeah.
That was the essence of what we did. And he wanted to really do patient monitoring and do all kinds of things with physiological signals, not use the computer for just models or databases or administrative purposes. So he used to call me up wake me up in the middle of the night saying he forgot what time it was, but he would get me at a weak point, and kept offering me the opportunity to go there. And I was upset in the meantime, and long story short, I ended up in Holland, and at this medical institute, and we started from the ground floor up. We used PDP 9s and 15s. We had graduated.
Yeah.
And I was there then for 5 years, and we built an extremely successful organization, still is, very well known. And the stuff we did in the computer area was, I think, kind of groundbreaking at the time, and has had its effects. So I was kind of proud of that. But that was the main thing I did, and we did a lot of computer design stuff. I mean, we really, it was like a pretty primitive time. So
Sure.
We had multiple computers communicating at high speed links. We had very distributed system. We had terminals that all over the hospital that we had to design and make happen. So that was 69 to 74. We're doing my life story, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Well, why would you leave that?
I was done. I felt that I had done what I had asked. They had asked me to do, and what I had signed up to do. I was there 5 years. During those 5 years, I got married, had children, and I had always wanted to go to Israel. It was a dream of mine, and now I had young children, and Holland wasn't really a great place to bring up Jewish children. Unfortunately, there weren't very many left.
Yeah.
After the war.
Sure.
So when I came to the conclusion I was done, I thought, the next stage of my life should be in Israel, and it was. We went to Israel in '74 and spent 5 years there.
5 years there.
Yeah. And by that time, I had had some academic recognition, even though I hadn't gone to college. And I had what was kind of equivalent to first assistant professor and then associate professor when I was in Holland. And then when I went to Israel, I became associate professor at the School of Medicine in Tel Aviv, in addition to starting up a business in medical electronics, because I felt that Israel really needed. People said we need export industry. We don't need professors. We got lots of professors. We need some business. And by that time, I had been consulting for HP. I'd been consulting for Digital Equipment Corporation. I had a lot of business experience, and I put it to work.
So you fell into it.
So I fell into it.
And what was it like to start a business in Israel?
Oh, God. Well, first of all, so now we're in 1974. We went to Israel soon after the October War, when I was actually not quite moved there, but looking for a place to live. People still had you could put your lights on in the car at night. They were still kind of reacting from the war. The government was very helpful, and the chief scientist's office gave the money to start this venture. So there wasn't any venture capitalists. It was the government, in a way. And of course, their terms were a lot better. And we didn't even have to return the money.
Great.
And so, but still, the problem was nobody knew how to build a business in Israel in those days. And the computer industry was very primitive. Elbit was a computer company. They were up in far north. Alcent was most of the technical people were in the aircraft industry. We located very close to the Weizmann Institute, and there were a lot of people there that were programming computers, but for science or whatever. I hired people right out of school, and we found a place. We were associated with a company that already existed, so we became a subsidiary of another company because I didn't really know how to build all that infrastructure. And God, there were we had some abandoned buildings actually we went into, and literally there were Bedouins camped in front of the door where we used to have to walk in. And but then you go inside, and then we lived, now by this time we're using PDP-11s, and of course they were really powerful. I remember they had 16K, and then we upgraded to 24K. We started building a team. I'm still in touch with people that I worked with then, and then we had to start learning to sell and market, and most of our market was all over the world, so it was being on an airplane a lot.
Yeah. And what was it that you made?
We made same things that I kind of was doing in Holland. They were patient monitoring equipment. We made catheterization equipment. So we had equipment for cath labs, patient monitoring, diagnostic equipment, all cardiovascular. All of that was cardiovascular.
So you really had a strong medical career for this period of your life, and yet that's not what we think of you as doing.
No, this was what happens when you live a long time. You have continuing careers. Yeah, I was up until 1979. My primary identification wasn't with computers; it was with medicine using computers, and I felt like I was extremely specialized.
What's going on?
Do we need to get her to...
Just noise. No, don't worry about it.
Yeah? Won't bother you?
No.
You edit this out. I was very specialized, and I had been for a long time. By this time I'm 30... Well, I left Israel in 79. I'm 34 years old.
Okay.
And so I really kind of felt myself... I had decided that Israel was just... If I had two lives, I would have spent one in Israel. But I really needed more space, or our family needed more space. And I felt that the combination of computers and medicine was very narrow. And so I forced myself kind of rigorously by saying, do you want to be in medicine or do you want to be in computers? And once I asked myself the question, I knew I could never give the computers up. But I couldn't imagine giving medicine up, so that was simple. And because I had done a lot of work with Digital Equipment Corporation over the years, I knew a lot of people there. Basically, they had, many times people had extended me offers. It was the first place I really went to look at, and I got a job there.
In 79?
In 79, yeah.
Now, in 79, Digital Equipment Corporation was on top of the world.
Yeah, we were the second largest. In 1979, DEC was the second largest computer company, and it was the one that was doing really all the interesting work.
Yeah.
My first job was running. The company kind of was divided in some funny ways, but we basically had software and hardware, big and small. So if you want to think about it being kind of in a four quadrant, I ran the small hardware group.
Okay.
Until we kind of reorganized, and then I ran the low-end business group, or the product group for the low end. So at that time we had the product marketing basically to a large extent, and product development, and working with manufacturing, all the rest is kind of put together, and I was the general manager for that.
Mm-hmm. And did you work with Ken Olsen?
I did. I worked very closely with Ken Olsen.
Well, tell us about Ken Olsen.
It's all documented in the Ultimate Entrepreneur, tell you about Ken Olsen.
What is the thing, like a story or the anecdote that would bring us the greatest understanding of what made Ken Olsen tick?
Well, I don't know if it's the only one, but I'll give you one.
Yeah.
Which was basically I was charged with developing the product that was to be compete with the personal computer the IBM brought out to the market. We started at the same time. We started before we knew IBM, but IBM got to the market before. But we were building a low-end product in a time when people didn't say personal computer,
sure.
But it was basically a personal computer. Mm-hmm. and it was called the Professional Series.
Okay.
And my group was also doing other low-end products. And I was very concerned about the marketing and selling of the product. And I would have discussions with Ken about that. Ken was more concerned about the power supply and things like that. And he would want to talk about those things. And I would say, but Ken, we've really got, how are we going to, get this to market? How are we going to sell it? In a sense, I was saying, how do we position it? But I didn't know how to, those words in those days. I wasn't that sophisticated as a marketing person. But I was, and Ken said to me, and I said, Ken, to win in this market, we've got to have great marketing and a good product. And he says, no, we've got to have a great product and good marketing. And I'd say, no, and we go back and forth, kind of almost yelling at each other. And then he finally said to me, you don't understand. We'll never have great marketing.
and he was right.
He was right. And a few weeks later, there was a meeting of the top 200 managers of the company. This would happen like twice a year. And Ken started out, and Ken was a really Machiavellian kind of guy, but he started out saying, Avram Miller is one of the best managers we have. He's very smart. He knows a lot about technology. This is how Ken would talk. He is a good manager. He can get people to do things and so on. But he has a problem. There was the problem. He says, he wants to do marketing. He says, why would anybody, all the marketing people were in the room, why would anybody who could do engineering want to do marketing? Which was the other part, the second part of this. Why could we never have good marketing?
Yeah, exactly.
So, that's one thing that I will always remember about Ken.
Wow.
Yeah.
And of course, ultimately, compared to the IBM PC, you weren't successful.
No, even though it was we did have much, better product. The first IBM machine really wasn't a very good machine at all.
And a very poor power supply.
And actually, we did. Well, I got one of the first ones, and I took it apart along with Ken. We had our screwdrivers out, and this is the CEO of Digital Corporation, and I, one of his general managers, were sitting there, we disassembling this machine, and he looks at me and says, if you ever built anything like this, I would fire you. But of course, we totally got, the marketing was totally screwed up, and also the product, our products would be late because, we had to make everything perfect, and also, the more and more people got involved in it, which nobody wanted to get involved at IBM, and I know the IBM story very well because in my next part of my career, I hired the people who developed the IBM PC.
Oh.
So we used to swap stories a lot, but people in IBM didn't want anything to do with this toy.
Yeah.
One, because I think to some extent because Ken was so involved in this, everybody eventually wanted to get involved. And at Digital Equipment Corporation, nobody could say yes and everybody could say no. So, you constantly, and then we had like committees. We had the High Priest of Technology Committee where all the, technologists would be there, and you'd have to go and, talk to them, and they could say, no, I don't think that this is the right thing. We had a keyboard committee, which kept me really late because they kept trying to figure out what should be on the keys. And it almost killed me. I couldn't get the product done, and then finally I had a brilliant, idea at the time. We were working on the keyboard for the 200 series. Everything was called 200, the terminals, 200 series. And so I came in and I told them, I said, you guys are amazing. You are the most wonderful people in the world. You're so dedicated. I feel great confidence that you're never going to let this keyboard go out until it's perfect. And so, but of course, I have a little problem because we have the next generations coming working on. So I've started another committee down the hall to work on the next generation keyboard. That week they were finished.
Yeah, of course. Oh, there's a lesson learned.
Yeah, no, there were many lessons about how to manage.
Wow. Well, but why did you leave digital? If it sounds like it was going swimmingly.
Well, no, I mean, I was pretty mature towards the end. First of all, we wouldn't be successful.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get out there. I didn't want to be with the politics of that company were, insane. And I wanted to do something on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm probably 38 years old. And, but I guess, I don't know, made a mistake. I didn't make a mistake. I could have started a company at the time. I was very interested in networking. And I had given, in fact, maybe the first order to 3Com.
Mm-hmm.
I had been the Digital Equipment Corporation representative on the three-party Xerox, Intel thing, and my job was to make the Ethernet fly in our product. And our product, coming out, remember our PC in 1982 had built-in Ethernet.
Uh-huh.
And I was very interested in the whole networking business and so on, and I kind of thought, I could start a company to do it and all the rest, but I was nervous to start a company. I just wasn't sure. I guess I was never really meant to be an entrepreneur. When I got recruited away by a company called Franklin Computer, which was building a clone of the Apple II, and managed to develop a very compelling business. I mean, they were really doing very, very well. And the company was had a lawsuit, but the lawsuit had been, Apple had tried to sue the company, and it had been rejected, the lawsuit, been denied, and it was out on appeal, but everybody felt the appeal was nothing. Turns out the appeal was something.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to go public. I still have the red herring someplace. And we were going faster than Compaq.
Mm-hmm.
And what they offered me was the opportunity really to shape that company and make it what I wanted to make it, because they weren't married to being an Apple II clone.
Mm-hmm. Which is just as well, because the app was going to be taken away from them.
Yeah. Well, it would have been, the world would have been better if Franklin had been able to be an Apple II clone,
sure, and
Apple had allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
And today the world would look a lot different. Because we weren't bad people. We were willing to pay a royalty to Apple. We were trying to build products that were different than what Apple was doing, but ran the same software. We appreciated the concept of software platform, and but Apple would have nothing of it, and Apple, through everything it could, basically crashed the company.
Yeah.
And kept us from getting the financing. And so it was really kind of a weird experience, because in our first year of operation, we did $100 million in sales. And then I kind of had to undo the whole company, because I couldn't afford the inventory, and I had to sell off inventory to keep financing the company. I couldn't get anybody to put money in, because, in appeal, the appellate court had decided that the lower court was in error, not on matters of the case, but on matters of the law,
mm-hmm,
which was a technicality, and send it back. And anyway. That was the first time in my whole career I ever hit the wall, so to speak. I had something that didn't work out. And I was in shock about it. And after about a year and a half or something, I left Franklin, because none of my skills were the skills that company needed at that time.
Now, is the company that makes those little dictionaries and things?
That Franklin Publishing is Franklin Computer Company. The only thing that exists from my time is the logo.
Okay.
Still the same logo. And I think there are one or two board members that are still around, but I don't have anything, of course, to do with them. So that brings me, kind of up to joining Intel, which was in 1984. And when I joined Intel, a company I never expected to join, or it was kind of surprising that it ended up happening. And
Well, how did it come about?
well, it came about because somebody had read about me or something, and they evidently said to Les Fidesz, who at that time he's badge number 3, now retired, one of the key guys that was there from the first day, and the guy really who had made the microprocessor happen inside Intel. Les was running something called the strategic staff, and kind of driving the strategy process in the company. They had come up with the notion of a strategic hire. Like once a year you could hire somebody just because you wanted to hire that person, and you didn't have to have a job for them.
Okay.
But you'd bring them in at a senior level, and somehow that would bring something into the company that the company didn't have.
Yeah. It was a DNA transfer.
Yeah, I think I'm the only one that ever worked, but
Okay.
but well, maybe there are others. But it didn't. Because it was a very difficult environment to do, DNA transfer. But I started talking to Les, and I really liked him, and I was trying to understand.
Okay.
So, where were we? So I met Les. I really liked him. There were things about Intel that reminded me of digital in terms of the focus on technology that I kind of liked that, and I was fascinated by the idea of the semiconductor technology and what you could do about it. So Les, was kind of interested in me joining, and I said to him, he explained to me the strategic planning process in the company, and so I said to him, would you mind if I looked at the long-term strategy of the company? Could I see it? And he gave me a document, put me in a conference room, and he gave me a document. And I turned, and on the first page it says, "Change is our ally." And I thought, oh, God, that's wonderful, and I was really excited about that. And I was excited about it, read. But on the other hand, I was convinced that the company really, that I had something to offer them, that they knew almost nothing about the computer industry. And they were primarily, at those days, a memory company. I used to say they sold silicon by the ton. Mm-hmm. And there was this microprocessor stuff going on, but the main business was the memory business. And they sold to all, it was before the PC had really taken off that much, and they were selling. I mean, like a big company, a customer was AT&T, and they were selling things that went into switches and things like that. So I thought I would be of help to them. And eventually, I met Andy, I met Gordon. And these are really amazingly smart people. And the other thing that I thought about, and I went back to digital, and I said, we had really great strategies inside digital, but we had lousy execution. And when you have lousy execution and things are late, it looks like your strategy was bad. And so I thought, I'm good at the strategy stuff. I want to be someplace where the execution is great. And maybe that's the right combination for me. Mm-hmm. And so eventually I decided I would join, and they said to me, well, you come and you figure out what you want to do. And so I didn't have any assignment. And I was pretty, I was pretty senior and pretty expensive by their structure.
Sure.
I reported to one of the senior vice presidents, who reported to the CEO, and they said, come on in and figure out what you want to do. And so I liked that.
Yeah.
So I joined them.
And what did you figure out to do?
Well, it took a while. The first thing first of all, I spent time trying to understand what was going on inside the company. And there were a number of projects that were happening that were kind of related to the computer business. And some things I got the company not to do because I felt that they would not have been effective at doing them.
What's an example of something you got them not to do?
Building personal computers.
Wow.
And there was a group that wanted to build the PCs and OEM them, and I felt that there were enough people that were going to do that, that there was no reason for us to do it, and that I felt like we wouldn't be that effective at doing it, and our costs wouldn't be that good at doing it. And but I discovered that the company was engaged in something that I think if I had known it was doing that, I would not have joined, because I would have realized I would have gotten involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't what I really wanted to do, because secretly what I wanted to do was get in the consumer electronics business.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what my interest has been even for so long. I was interested in the consumer business. Mm-hmm. And one of my closest friends, still is, Steve Mayer, was the co-founder of Atari, and I had spent a lot of time looking at, you know, consumer products and other things. I was really interested in it. So I discovered that the company had a big project with Siemens to build an object-oriented computer.
Oh.
And they had done something called the 432 before, and then everybody knew the 432 was a failure. Well, lo and behold, they hadn't given that up. They were going to do another one. And it was going to be fault-tolerant, object-oriented, multi-processing. It was every kind of magic you could imagine. It had all kinds of silicon involved in it. And it was Siemens, and it was Intel working on it. And so once I understood what they were up to, I more or less volunteered to get involved and lead the business, marketing, business development part of it, not the engineering. Mm-hmm. And I did that for about 3 years, and then we eventually ended up with a joint venture between Intel and Siemens called Vine, and which turned out to be a miserable failure. Mm-hmm. Because a joint venture is basically like running a three-legged race, and you know. But the whole thing in some sense was doomed structurally from the beginning, because if we had formed the joint venture, the two companies were going to compete with each other. And sure. We formed the joint venture. Anyway, it's a long story, but I mean, a lot of good things came out of the 960, which was still I think used by Intel, but the control line of Intel came from that project. For a while, I was responsible for that also in the company. And the company developed an amazing amount of know-how. I say Intel would not have been successful in retrospect had we not done that project. Mm. Because we would have never had the people that we later relied on to develop the architectures and to do all the things that we did, and the Intel labs and everything came out of all that. Yeah. Because Siemens basically funded Intel to hire all those people. Yeah. But the project itself, you know, wasn't a success. And then after that, I guess I got my rhythm, because what I really decided we needed to do was to invest in early stage companies. And that Intel was in a great position to understand where to invest, and we needed these companies to do things and succeed. And I was very concerned that we wouldn't be able to develop, that the company was too insular. Yeah. And so I started what then became Intel Capital, still working for Les Pedez, yeah. Who eventually, the Intel Capital grew. We didn't call it Intel Capital at the time, we called it Corporate Business Development. But anyway, it grew to the point that Les, instead of that being one of the things reporting to him through me, Les came over, we grew it, we added some more people to do other parts of it than I was interested in, and we grew Intel Capital to, I think, at the time I left until 1999, was certainly one of the, if not the largest venture firm in the world.
Wow. Where'd you get the money?
We got the money from Intel, and at the beginning, it was very hard. We had to we had to go to Andy for each deal. And we're talking about $1 million or $500,000 or $2 million. Yeah. And then later, I think Les was able to get the board and Andy to agree to give us $50 million. And I think that I don't think we ever got probably more than $200 million negative before we threw off more cash than we were spending.
Really?
Yeah. And that if you take out of I think later there were some very large investments in companies like semiconductor companies and things like that that we did that you could say, well, they were minority investments, but they weren't really venture capital, you know. But if I look at the venture capital portfolio, we were cash positive pretty early, and stayed that way.
And so you just bootstrapped it from there.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it wasn't like we had a fund and they kept the money there and we got a carried interest or whatever. But I mean, but you know, our investments were on the books as an asset. If they became impaired in some way or other, we invested in a company that didn't work, we'd take a loss. But if we marked them up, or if we realized the gains, of course, then we'd offset that. So we never, in the days I was there, we never had a loss.
Wow. What were some of your big successes?
Mine personally, I would say, you know, now we have to see if we have to separate strategic success from financial success and whatever. But I would, you know, broadcast.com was a huge win for us financially.
I bet.
We sold it to, we were first people in there. We were the first people in VeriSign. I think, you know, we put $1 million in. We took out, I don't remember exactly, but it would be, you know, well over $500 million.
Wow.
We had, let's see, who else would be in those categories? CMGI, we made investment in CMGI that became, you know, very significant when we liquidated. PCCW, we formed a joint venture with well, at that time with Richard Lee in Hong Kong to go after the satellite distribution in Asia. Eventually we rolled that into PCCW. That became, I mean, I'm talking about things that had returns larger than $500 million.
Wow. Sounds like timing the sale is important.
That was another thing that was really, well, you can't always time the sale, but and believe me, a lot of our success was due to the internet bubble, of course.
Sure.
But you know, many of the companies that we invested in, those are the returns, but many of the companies that we invested in became either exist or became part of other companies, and what we invested in went on.
Yeah.
But you know, key part, there's two parts to being successful in the venture business. There's investing and there's divesting. And one of the more difficult things when you're a corporate venture company is divesting, because people say, oh, Intel doesn't believe in the company anymore, Intel doesn't this or whatever, the people don't like it, they put pressure on you, you may have other business relationships, and so it's very hard. And I, at least from the portfolio that I managed, which was the largest portfolio in Intel Capital, I, you know, implemented some discipline that every quarter, you know, we went through and we decided what we were going to take off the table. And I think that was very important. Discipline to have. And I'm sure that Intel has that now. I don't know. You know, I've been gone for over 6 years. I don't really know how they do things.
You know, Andy Grove has never struck me as a warm and cuddly guy.
No, Andy Grove is he's not warm, he's not cuddly. He actually is caring. And I have seen Andy to be generous and caring. So Andy, you know, personally did things for me when I, you know, got prostate cancer. Andy was there for me, you know, completely. He was my mentor. He had been in the class 1 year ahead of me. And so, you know, he was very involved and very helpful to me, and has helped many other men who have had prostate cancer and given a lot of himself. So I think generous like that, but he's not a person who makes you feel good about yourself, I would say, when you meet him, you know.
So what would you say are Intel's greatest strengths and weaknesses?
Well, again, I can only speak to the Intel that I knew.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, so it's probably
the old Intel.
Well, the current Intel's probably, it's probably got a lot similar with the old Intel. Companies now, I guess, what is it, 30...
Started in 68. So.
68, yeah, almost 40 years old.
Yeah.
I was there 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 15 years when we went from under $1 billion to, I guess, about $28 billion when I left. I'll have to do this in kind of a little bit of a random way. The ethics of the company I think are great. The honesty of the company and integrity of the company is something I've never really seen any other place. You never, during the least time I was there, the idea of lying or even exaggerating to a customer, telling a story or whatever, it just, especially amongst the senior people, would never be tolerated. You told the truth. You dealt with the truth. It was a culture of wanting to understand the truth, and I think it was very important because if you couldn't get the truth, you couldn't find out what was wrong with what you were doing. And one of the approaches to learning, looking for problems, which the company was really good at finding problems, sometimes not finding, not as good as understanding the good side of things. Whereas you're building this complicated product, this microprocessor. There's got to be something wrong there. You can't build it without it having problems. So tell me what the problems are so we can fix them, and trying to get people, it was almost a celebration of, oh, I found a problem. And then people would say, great, now we can fix the problem. So, but the discipline of keeping your word, of making something happen, of finishing something, the rewarding of things that were actually done as opposed to may be done. It was hard for me in the beginning to accept that, but I grew to really cherish it, and so it was really great at execution and discipline and teaching people skills, and I think it was to a large extent a meritocracy, and also a lot of things were tolerated. You could really speak your mind. Mm-hmm. If your mind was, I don't think this is going to work, but then you had to have a reason. It couldn't be, that guy's stupid. That wouldn't be accepted. Mm-hmm. But this is a bad product idea, would be accepted. And you could say why you thought it was a bad idea, and you would never be taken down for that. Yeah. You could also fail, and if you failed for good reasons, you were given another shot, and I cherish that too. The weakness for me of the company, weaknesses were, I think, the part of strategy that has to do with understanding that markets might change. Because I don't want to say they're weak in strategy, because they were amazing in terms of manufacturing strategy, unbelievable, or technology strategy, what technologies would have, how do we develop the technology, how do we get the right infrastructure, or whatever. But trying to understand the market, I was the person who was a proponent of the computer in the home. Mm-hmm. When people at Intel refused to think that there was a computer, would ever be a computer at home, it was something that you just couldn't accept or understand because they didn't understand it.
Yeah.
Or people would play games on a computer. Nobody would play a game on a computer because they didn't play games on a computer, mm-hmm. and so on. So, they were very insular, and I think to some extent it created an opportunity for me because I was more of an extrovert, and I would go out and bring information in. But I think that was and still is a problem. I think another problem is the company was, I think, intimidated by Microsoft. Mm. And, and it's easy to be intimidated by Microsoft. Microsoft, is intimidating. Yeah. And I think that that many times Intel would have liked to have done something, but Microsoft didn't like it, and Intel was basically a little bit afraid of Microsoft.
I talked to an Intel guy who told me that they were Microsoft's bitch.
Well, yeah, that would be a way. it might be a way to describe it. I wouldn't describe it exactly that, but I think that it was, and there was basically one of the issues in this was that if you're a software company, you're used to selling upgrades. There really isn't an upgrade for a microprocessor. And so you need to try to push faster and faster the applications that use the power. And in the beginning, the companies were more aligned that way. But over time, they become less aligned that way because it was more interesting to get your install base to upgrade. Well, your install base has old computers. Well, you don't want to cause them. You have to buy a new computer, which means you won't take advantage of the features.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So I think that maybe was one of the issues.
Has AMD been good or bad for Intel?
Well, I guess I would say probably good. You know, I think it's good to have. I mean, I think there are times when it's not good. You know, but generally it's good to have a benchmark and a competitor, and you know, it's hard to imagine what the world would have looked like had there not been. All the other companies that tried to build, so interesting is the power of the Intel architecture franchise, because the other companies that tried to get into the market with other kinds of processors never really succeeded. And now that we see Apple moving over to the Intel architecture, you know, it's really pretty much, you know, in the PC world, in the world of desktop notebook world, I guess there's really nothing left.
Yeah.
You know, you do see like other kinds of architectures for other kinds of devices, and you will continue. But in that world, it's, you know,
100%.
Yeah. But it's so funny, now that it's 100%, it doesn't seem as important. You know, it seems to me like people don't speak about the microprocessor as much. You know?
No, they don't.
And it doesn't seem as quite as interesting. But I think that's partly because it's also really just not the gating thing anymore. It's not, you know, I wish it was, you know, because, I mean, I'd like to be thinking about how we could use all that processor power and so on. It's, you know, but I mean, we just don't, you know, have good ways to use it. And, you know.
Sounds like we need a revolution in software.
Yeah. Well, thank God for desktop indexing. Mm-hmm. You know, those indexers use lots of time to. They just go through your desktop all day long trying to figure out, you know, what things are so you can get to it faster.
Yeah.
So I have 3 or 4 indexers running because I like to compare them, and thank God for them, because now those are the only programs that in a day might use an hour of computing time. You know, I go to, you know,
sure,
look at my task manager and see who's using computing time.
Yeah.
And they're the only ones that are using it. Of course, you know, when you use something like if you render something or you're doing, I mean, that's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to find something that uses the power.
So where are we going to be 5 years from now? Same place?
You know, it's always hard to say, and I'm always scared to say it. You know, there are all these trends, many of which I don't feel. I'm not sure that they're really going to work out. Like the mobile trend, you know, everything's going mobile. Well, I understand that. I mean, I understand you want to carry things around on your person.
We have a tradition of phones ringing on the show. It's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, it's my mobile computer. But I think I'm really waiting for a better interface for a mobile device, and you know, it shocks me that I can't use voice to control a mobile device. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't want to go around when I'm 7 years old with my thumbs like this. You know, you know, I think there'll be a whole group of people that will be like this. You know,
yeah.
And I think there's going to be some serious problems in the future. So, you know, but I think what I guess you have to say is, well, I guess I have to go back and ask you to refine your question, Roy, because if you say, well, what's the home going to be like? What's the office going to be like? What's the car going to be like?
What's your life going to be like?
What's my life going to be like? And how would it be changed by technology?
Yeah. I mean, you're on the leading edge.
I might have
you buy everything.
Well, I might actually have a media center that works.
The media PC has been sort of a bust, hasn't it?
I don't have one of those yet that works. I'd like to have one of those. I think that I think that one of the great challenges is something. I wish I could give it a different word because I don't want to give it the word search. And I think other people have talked a lot about this, but it is just too hard to get to things. I think for me the problems right now is it's too hard to get to things, so to find things. I mean, why should I be doing this guessing game where I'm sitting at my computer, I'm guessing what are the right set of words that I can put into Google that will get me because what I want is out there. I know it's there.
Yeah.
But the challenge to me is, can I figure out the right combination of words that will find the thing that I want? And I don't know what will replace that, but I would really like to get to things. That's one. The second thing is that everything is too hard to learn. And I've made for myself a matrix of how hard is it to learn something and how easy is it to forget it. Okay? And so unless something is in the easy to learn and easy to remember domain.
Mm-hmm. Like using a telephone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like Quicken tends to be in the easy to learn, easy to use domain. Photoshop tends to be in the hard to learn, easy to forget domain. Mm-hmm. Dreamweaver, I every once in a while I want to build a website or whatever, and I do, and I learn the stuff. And the next time I want to do it, I have to start all over again because I can't retain any of the things, So I think that we've got to spend a lot more time trying to figure out how to make things accessible to people and not spend so much time learning how to use them.
But do you think that comes from a tradition of being, sort of technical tradition of being proud that you can do something that's hard to do?
Maybe, but I think what happens is that it's very hard for the developers and designers to really understand. They're too sophisticated and they're too much in their own product. And they don't spend enough time getting feedback, but also we have not developed the Don Norman kinds of people. The developers, the designers that, work on it. And we have people to develop really good stuff like IDO with how things are packaged.
Yeah.
I can use it to take me full circle to Digital Equipment Corporation because when I was there and I was responsible for the low end, we had a product called DeckMate, which was one of the first word processors. And one day, Ken Olson looked at the back of it and he saw all these wires and cables. And he got infuriated. I had just taken over, so I wasn't quite to blame for it, but he got infuriated about it. And he made a poster, and he put the poster with the back of this thing, and under it he wrote, engineering or marketing, meaning who's to blame. And then we had the name the poster contest, and my entry was, can you imagine what software would look like if you could see it? So, and I mean, I can't even imagine what it would look like, So, I don't know, maybe I won't be using computers as much, or as I am even now, because, they gotta, I'm getting tired of fighting with them a little bit, Anyway, that's my life. I think of, at my age, 60, I want to learn a lot of things, and I want to leave something still more behind. And that's the other thing I wrestle with. I just don't see these podcastings and these blogs as staying around. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd be actually interested what you think about that. But I just see these as being kind of graffiti.
Yeah. But Nerd TV is for the ages.
Nerd TV might be because it's, you know, it's more, because traditional media that we have, it took a long time to develop.
Yeah.
It didn't develop by accident. And to the extent that we find better ways to do it and produce it, I think it's good. I do think there will be other forms of media, but I wonder what they are. And I'm not sure that we've seen them, and I'm not sure that they're blogs, and
Yeah.
you know, or maybe I'm just getting old. You know.
Well, aren't we all?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Abram.
You're welcome.
This program is made possible by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This is PBS.